So you asked the question, can you win a national title with a high-powered offense and a so-so defense? So where did that come from?
Well, we're in that time of year, right, where we're seeing lots of explosion in football. Matter of fact, Tennessee beats Alabama for the first time in 16 years, 52-49, over 1,000 yards of offense in there. And all of a sudden, the SEC is going, yeah, we can score on each other. I remember when this was blasphemous, right? 9-6, that's what y'all do. But now that Tennessee is showing everybody you can go fast and you can score, is that sustainable? Because the defense isn't outstanding, but I thought it was worth asking the question, can you win a national championship with a top high-powered offense and a so-so defense? And I'm really interested to see what answers you pull from that question.
Yeah, so you got a lot of responses to this question. And let's start off with this one coming from Kevin L. Matthews II, who says, I think the 2019 LSU proved it, but that's about it. Maybe that 2010 Auburn team too. Now, I will say that a lot of these responses, a lot of people did include that 2019 LSU team. And I think there might be some misconceptions about that defense.
Yeah, there are a handful. And I'm going to take on the offensive part of this and get to the misconceptions when we get to your really discussion about what this answer means. But 48.4 points per game. Joe Burrow wins the Heisman after throwing for 5,000 plus yards and 60 TDs with just 6 interceptions. And you've got ridiculous wide receiver. Matter of fact, perhaps the best wide receiver core on one football team that anybody's ever seen, taking into account what they accomplished at LSU and what they're doing in the NFL. Justin Jefferson, Terrace Marshall, and of course, Jamar Chase. And then you put the duo of Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase together, and all they do is go to the Super Bowl shortly after winning the national championship in 2019. They won the Joe Moore Award with that offensive line. That offense is ridiculous, and we might see somebody approach that, but I remember thinking at the time that it's phenomenal what they're doing, but fascinating what they're doing given the defense that they were playing, right? Because this is also a team that needed to beat a Texas team that wasn't great, 45-38. And then we're looking at other games where they play really tight against Auburn. And I think you're onto something when you talk about perhaps we should take a harder look at this team.
Right. So that defense, well, it wasn't in the top 20 in scoring defense. They had 6 guys on that defense get drafted in the 2020 NFL draft. And then that doesn't even include guys like Derek Stingley Jr., who was maybe the best freshman cornerback in college football history, came out and was dominant right away. So even though they were out, they might have given up some points. I know Grant Delpit was injured that year. That team was still really, really good. And yeah, that offense might have been the most decorated offense ever. I mean, they had number 1 overall pick at quarterback, first-round pick at running back, Joe Moore Award-winning offensive line, and like you said, maybe the greatest wide receiver tandem, at least in my lifetime, I would say. So kind of, it's like, yeah, you can win a national title, but like maybe you have to have the greatest offense ever.
I am also, like, we're going to get yelled at if we don't say Clyde Edwards-Helaire's name just right away. But it's a great point you make about those 6 players that were drafted. As a matter of fact, at the time, they set the record for the most players drafted in one single NFL draft off of one team. That's how stacked they were on both sides of the ball. And they also had one of the great defensive coordinators over there in Dave Aranda, who flipped Baylor into a Sugar Bowl winning team like literally 3 years later. I'm really impressed with what that team still looks like, you know, in hindsight, because at the time I was not that appreciative of what they were able to do, because frankly, they had a 20-point lead against Alabama at halftime, and they only won that game by 5 points. And it really came down to the defense having to make a play. So I think there's a lot to pick on there, but really the take is if you have a generational offense, yeah, you can have the 32nd best defense in all of FBS and still win the national championship without losing a game.
Yeah, right. And like Kevin said here, maybe that 2010 Auburn team too. So I guess, yes, you can. You just have to have maybe the greatest college football player of my lifetime. Well, so it's all it takes.
Here's the thing. That there, right, is contentious because your man's a couple summers ago, you know, the summer of the plague, was like, I'm going to write a column about the 10 best college football players of all time. And I have Cam Newton at the top of the list. For one reason, he's that dude at Auburn. Okay, I stress this, and this is not to dunk on Auburn fans, but you know what it is, you Auburn. At Auburn, nobody heard from Gene Chizik before or after. Not really, right? That dude really single-handedly put you in the national championship game and won you one. It's him and Nick Fairley. That's about it, right? You can't name anybody else on either one of those offenses or defenses That's how ridiculous he was. And we've seen other players that feel like they are that caliber of player, but I still single him out because none of those dudes went to Auburn and won a national championship. That's my high horse on 2010 Auburn. Also helps that they were actually pretty doggone decent when it comes to defense. I think they gave up just over 22 points per game.
Yeah, what is Gene Chizik doing nowadays? He's the defensive coordinator at North Carolina, giving up 45 points to a Drew Pine-led offense. Okay, let's get to our next response here. This one comes from Urs, who says, no, ask OU under Riley. This one hits a little bit close to home for you.
Right in the heart. Like, just stab through it, man.
Hey, me too, man.
Well, it's one of these things where you keep asking yourself this question. And when I had the local radio show in Tulsa, 9 to 11 weekdays, I would do basically college football. And I talk a bunch about Oklahoma. And in 2017, 2018, 2019, we would have the same discussion at this time of year, which is, hey, can Oklahoma actually win a national championship? Not make the playoff, not win the Big 12. Can you win a national championship with a bad defense? Not a so-so defense, a bad defense. And the answer is unequivocally no. If nothing else, you're going to get your head handed to you in the playoff. That's what we learned about great offenses putting up 45, 46 points per game and bad defenses. You have to be very good to great to ensure your chance of winning a national championship. But if you're an Oklahoma fan, one of the reasons that you were so excited about Brent Venables becoming the head coach at Oklahoma is for the first time, and it feels like about 15 years, OU is going to get to walk out and say, we got the best defense on the football field. And that hasn't been true, at least in the first 7 games. Maybe it gets better as he gets more of his players in and doesn't have to deal with a roster that's been gutted. Everybody learns the system. But yeah, there's a reason as to why Oklahoma fans feel some kind of way about this question, which is always going to end for us in a no.
Right. And that's another thing about those Oklahoma offenses. They were so good that they would score so quickly and get the defense right back on the field. So when they're on the field all the time, their flaws are going to get exposed more often. That's just how it's going to work when your offense is constantly scoring and giving the ball back to your defense. Let's get to our third response. So this one comes from James McCormick, who says, 2005 Texas feels like it might qualify. It matters to have the ball last in each big game like they did, though.
You're also talking about a defense that ranked inside the top 10.
Right.
Which is going to lead into a larger point I'll make here in a bit. But, like, you had Vince Young, who is up there, if not number one for me, Cam Newton. Number 2, right? You're talking about one of the greatest college football players who ever lived. And he had a top 10 scoring defense on the other side. Now, a point that I'm going to get back to Tyler on this because he raised this before the show. You're also playing a really great USC team, right, Tyler?
Right. Maybe the best offense ever. We've mentioned like 3 offenses that might be the best ever, but that 2005 USC team, man, they were just different.
Leinart, Bush, my goodness. And then I remember looking at the linebacking core and thinking that Ray Malaluga was going to be the dude. And it turns out, no, Clay Matthews, the dude that I did not care the least bit about, was the dude. And then you have Brian Cushing over there. They're just ridiculous.
Yeah.
That was such a stupid run for Pete Carroll and the Trojans. Y'all all know that Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush, a big part of what we do here at Fox Sports is college football vertical and, frankly, college football lore. But it also brings me into the discussion in a way that I wanted to answer this question because I've been asking it over and over again in different ways. And today, talking with producer Tyler about, just what needs to happen for a Tennessee or even a Texas Christian to not just make the college football playoff, but win a national championship. They're going to have to be outstanding defensively in the second half. That's just what it is. Because when I look at this, I'm talking about those 3 teams that we've hit on already. Auburn, which is a unicorn, right? Then we talk about 2019 LSU, which is also a unicorn. And then we're talking about 2014 Ohio State. So 2014 Ohio State does not have one of the top defenses in the country. And I think they got the 5th best scoring offense in the country. That year, they happened to be playing the 4th best scoring offense in the country, and another team that did not have a top 20 defense in Oregon. I don't know that we're going to see another national championship game where we end up with 2 defenses that do not rank inside the top 20 facing each other for the championship. And the way that both of those teams got there is also ridiculous. Remember, Ohio State had to march back through the standings just to get to the playoff. And it came down to them stomping a mud hole in a really good Wisconsin team, 59-0, and Texas Christian stomping a mud hole in a very bad Iowa State. Turns out having a 14 playoff was always a bad idea, if you ask me. But as we're also looking at this, I don't know that Tennessee can repeat the same sort of magic and the same sort of experience they had against Alabama when it comes to playing, say, Georgia, right? Because that is going to be the game for the SEC East. You ask me and you ask most college football fans. You're not going to win that game putting up 52 and giving up 49. You're going to have to hold Stetson Bennett in check. As a matter of fact, the way to look at this, I think, is going back to the national championship game where Alabama had, a lead. And they gave up that lead, but only after Stetson Bennett put the ball on the floor and the defense held up. We're talking about another generational defense. Nakobe Dean, Jordan Davis, Christopher the Peacemaker Smith, Keely Ringo. We can keep going down the line of just what Kirby Smart has been able to do defensively, and the offense has finally started to catch up. And I think that's the way that you build your college football program if you're trying to win championships. And then I looked at what we know from the first half of the year and which one of these teams do I think holds up. Georgia, obviously, right? That's one. The other two are actually in the Big Ten. Michigan, who has made a believer out of me, who has stomped a mud hole in every great rush defense that they've faced and knocked off in a convincing way Penn State in their last game. And then the other one is Ohio State, who's putting up more points than anybody else in football this year at 48.4 points per game. But they're also ranking just at number 10 in scoring defense, giving up 15.7 points per game. What's more interesting is that Michigan has a better scoring defense right now against what we might also say is better competition. They're giving up about 11.7 points per game so far through the first half of their season. So the game not only ends up being one of the biggest games, if not the biggest game of the regular season this year, and not just a play-in game, we think, for the Big Ten championship, but also a play-in game for what we think is going to be the college football playoff selection spot, because that team we expect to win the Big Ten championship. So I look at this and I say Ohio State stood up for this for the first time in years, and maybe the first time since 2002, when they have a defense that can do almost as much as the offense can do. You have a generational talent at quarterback in C.J. Stroud. You have outstanding wide receiver group like a la LSU, Emeka Egbuka, Julian Fleming, Marvin Harrison Jr., and that's before I get to a healthy Jackson Smith and Jigba. You've got outstanding tailbacks, and you've got a couple of players that you did not expect to get outstanding production from on the defensive side in the first year for defensive coordinator Jim Knowles. It's all coming together for them. And I'm going to get to see it up close here on Saturday when they play Iowa in Columbus. But that's what it takes. It takes you having a balanced program. You have to be outstanding offensively. You have to be outstanding defensively. Otherwise, you're just going to show up to the college football playoff and get your head kicked in. Because I'm an Oklahoma fan, that's just the way that it is. Tyler, anything out of there seem off base to you?
No, I totally agree. You have to have both at this point because the teams at the top are just too good now on both sides of the ball. You're not running into a team that's so one-sided. It just doesn't work out. But I think James brings up an interesting point because he says 2005 Texas feels like it might qualify. I think that's partially because, like we've mentioned, that last game that they played, they did give up a lot of points to that USC team. But as we've discussed, that was an unbelievable offense. That same Texas team shut down an Ohio State team earlier in the season that had Troy Smith, Ted Ginn Jr., and I'm pretty sure Santonio Holmes as well. So we think about that last game. They did give up some points, but that's because they went up against some great teams, and that's what happens when you get into these situations. So at this point now, like you just have to have both to win a national championship, and you're right. Right now, based on what we've seen so far, Ohio State really looks like the team that has the offense and the defense to win a national championship.
That's well said. It's well said. And I want to piggyback on that just by saying USC, Texas, right? That game, you just want to be able to cancel out the other one. And That's what we got, right? Somebody that can go blow for blow if it comes to that.
Exactly. We might see that again this year.
Thank you for watching the #1 college football show. Please remember to subscribe to the channel and like this video so that you don't miss any of the best college football coverage in America.